Hey guys, I am back with another romance arc review, and this just feels like one of the weirdest reviews to film, to put out, and there's like so many things going on with this. I have not been getting to like really very many of the arcs at all that I've been meaning to get to lately, but I definitely wanted to get to this one because it's the next book in a series that I really love. But first weird thing, this review will be released on Halloween, so happy Halloween, but it's a Christmas romance. So already things just feel very off kilter. The book in question is A Very Merry Bromance by Lyssa Kay Adams. This is the latest book in the Bromance Book Club series, which, while I've never actually reviewed any of the books on the channel in their own reviews, they've come up in like a million different little videos that I've made, like with lists or stuff like that, because I think that this series overall is one of my favorite romance series of all time. But this entry into the series is not that great. So again, love the series. I don't love this one. I haven't reviewed the rest of them, but I'm reviewing this one. And I just want to say, please do not judge the rest of the books in this series based on what is about to happen here. The third really, really bizarre thing about this review is the name of the main characters. And so in this, it is two characters getting together whom we have seen before. The male lead is Colton. He is a country singer who has shown up in, I think, all other books in the series, at least peripherally in the Bromance Book Club. And then the female lead in this one, her name is Gretchen, which is weird because that is my name. And my name does not show up in pop culture, like ever, except for maybe Mean Girls. And so I just hear all the time, Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen, because that's like their only cultural touchstone for my name. And Gretchen is a character that has showed up in these books before. I had forgotten, but she mostly shows up in Mac's book because she dates Mac briefly before he meets his now wife, Liv. If that doesn't mean anything to you because you've not read any other books in this series, that's fine. As with many standalone but related books, you do not have had to read the other books in the series really to understand this one, except for obviously by now it's a really tight-knit and kind of big group of characters who really all know each other and have intertwined lives, so you can feel left out on that regard, but you don't need to have read the other books in the series to have read A Very Merry Bromance. Except you should read those and not this one. I just saying. The fourth weird thing, and yes, this is another weird thing, is that I have to say up front that I do not like Christmas romance novels. Now, I understand that romance in general, it's full of tropes, right? We read them for tropes. And is it a grumpy sunshine? Is it an enemies to lovers? It is a second chance. But there is something about all of those tropes, and then you put Christmas, or really any holiday, but it's like really Christmas really gets me on top of it. And it just, I've never read a good Christmas romance. And in fact, I did not finish Sarah Hogel's latest book, which I tried to read earlier this month. And as you know, I love Sarah Hogel. I think she's fantastic. And I couldn't read it because it was a Christmas romance and it felt a little bit too ridiculous to me. Now, I say that up front because I have to admit to you that one of the reasons that I didn't like this one is that it wasn't ridiculous enough. And if you've read some of the other books in this series, you'll know that one of the things that makes them really, really hysterical is that there's always this extra level of hilarity, like whether it's the underground cheese ring or, you know, just Vlad in general as a character. There's always something really, really funny and a little bit over the top going on, and this book just didn't have that. So even though I DNF'd Sarah Hogel's latest book because it was like too much Christmas, this one just felt really bland. So there are so many weird things going on with this review, and we are going to get to it, but I just wanted to put that all up front, that like I just feel really unstable with this book. It feels really weird, and that probably all goes into impacting how I feel about this book in general. So as with many, I don't want to say all, but like many Christmas novels, this one is a grumpy sunshine trope. And in this one, we have Gretchen, the very career woman, you know, hyper-focused, Christmas-hating immigrant rights lawyer. She is from a very, very rich family that she turned her back on, and is now working as for a mostly pro bono immigrant rights lawyer, you know, people who have deportation cases, all that kind of stuff. And she thinks that her work is very important, and it absolutely is, but you know, she's very work focused, and you know, she even forgets that she schedules her office to work on Christmas Eve because that date is not important to her. And then there's Colton, who is also a super rich country star, and he doesn't know at first that Gretchen also comes from a super rich family, and kind of thinks that she's judging him for just being mega rich, but he's made himself rich, obviously. But he is at a doldrums moment in his career. He hasn't recorded in a couple of years. He sent some new stuff to his label, and they didn't like it. And so Colton is just feeling very unsure, unsteady, and he's been really unable to write songs. So the novel opens up with like a year prior to the actual events of the novel at Liv and Mac's wedding. This is two people who have been the subject of a different Bromance Book Club book. And at that wedding, Gretchen and Colton sleep together. And for Colton, it's an absolute revelation. You know, he's a, you know, high living pop star, country star who always has the girls and the money and the parties and whatever. And then he has this one night with Gretchen, and he's like, oh my God, like this is the woman for me. Something magical has happened. And so he wants to continue this relationship with her that started at the wedding. And that night, Gretchen says absolutely not, and she runs out. And then it skips forward a year, and we find out that this entire year Colton has been pining for her, and Gretchen has been trying really hard not to think about it. But Gretchen's rich family owns a distillery, and they want to use Colton as a brand ambassador. So Gretchen's very manipulative brother Evan rings her up and says, hey, will you pitch to Colton, since you know him through these mutual friends, to be a brand ambassador to us? And Colton, of course, sees this as an opportunity to not only get Gretchen to be in a relationship with him, but also to like teach her the true meaning of Christmas and whatever. And so they start seeing each other. Again, I say this knowing that many romance novels, they use the same tropes, right? So like the career-minded versus the more easygoing, the grumpy versus the sunshine. This is not new, and plenty of other romance novels have used it. But I feel like within this one, there were two things that I had a problem with. And one is that the trope just felt really forced. Like, you know, it's called A Very Merry Bromance, and so you know from the beginning that, you know, why Colton's focus is making Gretchen love Christmas, like from the get-go, really didn't make a lot of sense, except for the fact that this is a Christmas romance and that's the trope. And then their chemistry was just really not there for me in a way that these books have had both chemistry and a unique feel to their tropes that they use in the last couple. Again, some of them are better than others, but this one just felt like it is a Christmas romance. It is a grumpy sunshine romance, and these two characters, after this one night together, have to go through the steps of being a Christmas romance, whether or not it necessarily makes sense. And while I understand that maybe I have some book hangover from the last Bromance Book Club book, which was Vlad and Elena's story and was incredible and hysterical and so good, this book just felt really flat to me, and that made me really sad. I also really like books that do a lot of really interesting character stuff outside of the romance, and I think that this book had the potential for that. But the problem for me going through this book is that it really focuses on Gretchen's issues, her issues with her family, her problems with her job, how she feels about money, and Colton has something very serious going on. Like, his career could literally be collapsing in front of him, and it's really just not really dealt with. It comes up at odd moments, but it's not really developed. And so what it starts to feel is very unbalanced. And again, I'm all for grumpy sunshine, career driven versus, la la la. But this book just really starts to feel like Gretchen is the problem, and Gretchen has all these issues to deal with. And Colton is just like there trying to teach her to love Christmas and love herself. And even though he clearly has some things of his own that he's trying to work through or should be working on, the focus isn't there. And so it's like he's just like hanging out and waiting for her to realize everything that's wrong with her life and to deal with that. And I just don't really like that imbalance. I never like it in romance novels. It drives me up a wall. And I just really got that sense while reading this book. And again, feeling incredibly personally attacked because we shared the same name and that never happens. I think that the shtick of these books, of including the romance novel that they're reading within the pages, is also, it really felt in this book potentially becoming a little bit stale. In the other books, it's weaved in a little bit more. And this one, I think it only comes up like 2 or 3 times. And then you really have, when the Bromance Book Club is meeting, or specifically Mac is in the room, like they're all immediately telling Colton what he's doing wrong because so many of them already have partners. And so again, with that unbalanced feeling, while it's great to have the Bromance Book Club reconvening, they just seem to be like mansplaining to Colton what's wrong with him and what he needs to do, and he's not doing any actual self-work, and they seem bizarrely self-aware. And that has worked previously in past books, but with this one it just felt really heavy-handed. And again, maybe by book 5 that little shtick is going from something that was unique to something that has to be included now. And in this book in particular, it just felt really clunky and kind of like an afterthought when it used to be really central to the books. I don't want to say that this is a terrible book. I absolutely do not mean that. I do think that Lyssa Kay Adams writes excellent romance novels, and even though this one fell a little flatter than the others, I would still definitely recommend this series. And I wouldn't necessarily say that you shouldn't read this book. It's a fine romance novel. I think for me, when I'm expecting something better than fine, having just a fine or a good book, it's just not what I came in expecting. And so even though there's, it's fine, it's a perfectly fine book, it feels disappointing in a way that is potentially unfair to the actual writing quality of the plot and the characters and all that kind of stuff, just because it doesn't rise to the excellent level of many of the other books in the series. Again, I did have a feeling going into this book that anything that happened after Vlad's story, which was just so excellent and so funny and so ridiculous, I was going to have a little bit of a letdown after that. But I don't think that this book really had anything in it to help fix my personal problem there. And especially with it being a Christmas book, it just was not really, it was not set up to work for me. So I do say, as I always do, that these are just my opinions, and it's just not, it's a combination of many things that just don't often work for me. And maybe someone else who loves Christmas romances would have a different reaction. But I just think, between that and the chemistry and, it's so weird. They have almost too many family members involved when like something should be really emotional at the end and like really, but like there's just too many people and we don't care about or know half of them. And it's just like, this one just felt really removed and less funny than many of the other ones. So again, it's just my own personal opinion. You can have a different one, and certainly if you've read it, let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree. There are books for everyone, and this one is just not for me. But again, do not let that dissuade you from picking up the other books in this series. I really do adore it, and I will definitely, if there is another, pick that one up as well, because you know, this one happened to be a dud, but there are so many other good books in this series that, you know, I have faith that the next one for me may not be, especially if it's not Christmas themed. So happy Halloween and Merry Christmas, I guess. And I hope you guys have a great one. Bye.